Thank you again. Welcome to our next budget forum. A lot of this is repeat, but I think we're hoping to have a little more conversation now that we have some solid numbers around this, the budget from the state, and we wanted to show some options around where we are and what we're thinking of doing here in Kingston. I didn't plug this in, so it's not working properly. Just to add to our technical problems today. Now it's working. 5 propositions on the ballot this year. First, obviously, is the budget. Second is the creation of a new capital reserve. The third is the capital projects at JFK, Edson Elementary, and Miller Middle School. The fourth is the election of 3 board members. And lastly, the transfer of ownership of Deet Stadium to the city of Kingston. And just to add a little, today we have something a little different to show you.
Yes. So this is a little video that we created. It's about 3 minutes, and we're going to share this on our website and social media, but just a very simple way to show there's more than just the budget on the ballot. There's actually 5 propositions.
Our goals are always, again, first and foremost, our goal is to design a budget that balances the needs of our students with our community's values and their ability to pay. We always look to create a tax levy limit compliant budget, and again, the things that we all mentioned that we're doing with this budget for this school year. And again, on top of those goals, some of the things to talk about, the overall goals is to maintain the programs that we've put in place, to maintain our low class sizes at K-1, 2, to maintain our focus on curriculum and embedded professional development, to maintain our goals around keeping up our facilities. So those things are staying in place here. The tax levy limit, everyone's favorite conversation, and we'll talk more about this. We have some conversation we'd like to have about the tax levy limit. 2% tax cap, it is not. It is a tax levy limit. It's a complicated calculation, and it's different for every school district, every year. And just I've forwarded ahead a little bit here to show you that last year was 1.35. This year is 3.60. So clearly, it's different every year, and it's different from school district to school district. The tax levy impact on the Kingston City School District. We went over this several times, and the Board of Education looked at this last week. And what we just gave a sample of what some of those tax levies could be, and what that would mean for us as a school district. What we came down to was to balance the budget where we currently are, a tax levy of 2.62, which is about is a little bit lower than we are. It's about 1 percentage point lower than we are able to, by law, raise the tax levy, would balance our budget. But I want to put a little asterisk on that. And that is with the addition of $2 million of fund balance into this to balance this budget. Again, still with $2 million, I want to keep that in mind. $2 million in the revenues is, for all these calculations, is fund balance. So then we looked at 3.6, which is our tax levy limit, and that would give us about $1 million more than our current appropriations call for. So that's the above the cap, I guess we'd call that. If we went to a 2.5, we would have to find $126,000. If we went down to the 1.99, we would have to find about $641,000 through efficiencies or other revenues. And as I've said before, pretty much our revenues are what they are at this point. Not knowing what we know about the state education, the state budget, we know how much we're getting. There's no real other revenues that come in. Some other levy tax possibilities, and we also gave out. Did everyone get a sheet? Okay. So we also gave out a sheet that kind of gives us a little more. We didn't want to put it, going to be a little overwhelming to have that all on the screen, but we really took from the tax levy limit down to 2%, giving you the idea of what it would look like in each of those. Now, can you go 1/10 of a percent or whatever in between on any of these? Yes. But we just wanted to show you what those would look like and give you some ideas and what things we could do if we went into those tax levy limits. The 3.6, the decision at that point, so we know we'd be $1 million, almost $1 million to the good, with $2 million of fund balance. Our decision at that point would be to look and say, okay, let's reduce the reserve appropriation, the fund balance appropriation, or add to our programs for about $1 million. Same thing, we look at 3%, we'd be a little bit over. What would we want to do? What would the board want to do? Reduce the reserve appropriation or raise our programming and expenses? Going to 2%, now we're in a different place, right? So now we're in a deficit of $633,267. Then the conversation was, do we want to cut expenses or raise revenue, which is usually what we're talking about when we get to budget time. But again, on this sheet shows multiple different opportunities or options there. And I think I'll stop right there for a minute and just engage conversation. People would like to talk about what you have in front of you and some of the options that are out there.
Well, I think that we're going to be raising expenses with the new preschool program coming up. And so I think we have to, in terms of long-term planning, we have to think of that as a known expense that's going to rise. So I would be uncomfortable kicking in more expenses than that until we've accommodated that expense. That's not so far away yet.
Do we have an idea of how much that will be?
As far as the cost, it will be, we're looking at it from three different ways, I guess, or well, say two different ways. One is, are we going to be fully operational in the pre-K in 2 years? So will we be fully operational? Will we have four full classrooms with 19 students in each classroom, with the teacher and the teacher's assistants that we need in place? You know, the cost, I mean, and the transportation cost is still kind of unknown right now. So that will depend a lot about where our students are coming from and how many routes we would need and those kind of things. Also, we're calculating into that the cost of the transportation, because we also learned a few new things about the regulations around transporting 4-year-olds, as far as how many students can be in a seat that has a car seat, because students 4-year-olds require a car seat in the bus, and how many adults are supposed to be on that bus. So the transportation is still a little bit out there, but if you want to have round figures, I would say, you know, we're looking at $600,000 probably in personnel for that program, and probably, you know, we're probably looking anywhere between $600,000 and $800,000 to run that program every year.
Is that, we need a principal?
The administrative team will be there, so we are going to, right now, Dr. Felicello oversees UPK. She has her assistant directors, and one of them is assigned, their main assignment is UPK, so I think that we will, between that department, our team, we will cover the principal position.
And we need a nurse.
And we will need a nurse. And we're also wondering if we're going to need clerical support, or if we'll be able to use the clerical support we actually have in COE. So we're juggling around a lot of different things, trying to keep that cost from going up using the people that we have in-house. So I don't see us having a huge increase as far as administration around the pre-K, because we will have a lot of resources right on site to assist our teachers there.
There's also the possibility that you talked about, if we needed classrooms, of moving the pre-K that we currently have.
Correct.
So that wouldn't be an increase in staff costs.
Correct.
Because we already.
That is correct. And, you know, we do have the, I mean, if we get 120, you know, students, or say 20 per class, actually, if we have the 80 that but we have another 40, we do have 2 more classrooms in that building that we can use that really are in almost no need of renovation. They're beautiful classrooms on that second floor of the old kindergarten, the walk-through class. So, you know, looking at you know, the average teacher and average teacher assistant in each classroom, personnel-wise, we're, you know, well above the $500,000. And again, there are several different, and it's early to talk about this, but it doesn't seem like we should be talking about it, but we're also, you know, aggressively looking at grant money around pre-K. So we're also aggressively lobbying around pre-K and the possibility of expanding some of that from the state as far as the funds are concerned. So there's a lot of, as we all know, a lot of different things that can happen in a year. I think the more important piece of that is what Mr. Shaughnessy brought up last week, with the idea of not increasing the tax levy. If we don't increase the tax levy, then we get a percentage higher of a lower number next year when we are looking at the pre-K program. And that's one of the arguments that came up about the tax levy limit when it was put in place was, in some places they are asking, or really not asking, but it's some boards and some districts will go to the tax levy limit even if they didn't have to cover their, because of that loss in the future years.
So even if we go to 2.6%, 2.62%, we're still losing $1 million of levy. We're not taking $1 million of levy.
Correct.
Under the cap.
That's true.
So that's, you know, I mean, it's not that we're gouging the taxpayers.
If we went up to the 3.6?
No, if we went to the
2.6, right, oh, right, yeah. I mean,
Those are our expenses.
2.6 balances our budget. When you put in the fund balance, it's not, and if you're, no, yeah, we're still leaving $1 million on the table of tax levy that's not being levied onto our taxpayers.
And I think it's important to educate the public that the only reason we would do that is for the taxpayers' benefit. It's, you know, not to our benefit as a board necessarily for having more flexibility down the road.
Yeah.
But we're really trying to, as you said at the beginning, balance what our community can afford.
And the allocation of fund balance says that as well. I mean,
Right.
you know, we are going into our reserves to keep that tax levy low. And last year, I think, you know, the commitment to that was shown last year when even after the budget was voted on, at the end of the year, when we had unexpended appropriations, we put that into the tax levy to reduce. So it's one of those things that, we really, a positive thing we did without much, and basically no one knows it if we don't say it.
Right.
You know, so our tax levy, instead of being the 1.36, was 1.01 actually, even though the voters approved the 1.36.
Well, actually, what voters are approving is the
Appropriations.
the appropriations, and
Right.
not approving the levy.
Right.
So even with this plan, there's no additional program, there's no new program in the budget, right? This is just a rollover of what we have.
This is a rollover of what we have, plus the added expenditures that we have in the special education department, which is about $1 million. And, you know, I mean, our total appropriations increase, which is really what, before the tax levy, as Jim was saying, before the tax levy, people would vote on this, and really, most people would look at what is the percentage of your increase, how much of your costs going up. Our overall costs as a district, to operate the school district, are going up 3.21%. And, you know, operating a business year to year, your expenses are going up more than 3.21%. You know, and that's with an astronomical increase in our services to our special education students, as well as the challenges around health insurance that we have.
I would like to see coding introduced into the curriculum at some point. I don't know.
And I think there's a lot of things that we are doing and working on, and we are working on that. There's a conversation, I've had that conversation with about 25 people, including Jim. There's a lot of things that we are looking at changing about what we do programmatically that aren't necessarily about money. Sometimes they're about shifting, you know, looking at enrollment in classes. And so, you know, coding is exploding. That rhyme, but wasn't supposed to. But coding is one of those things, and maybe there's some other things we're offering that are fading away, that were just the traditional things we offer to replace them. You know, just the other day you heard we were adding a new senior elective with our multicultural classrooms, with our Black authors class. You know, that was a response to the idea of having a you know, culturally responsive education and being able to have that, but also in seeing some senior electives that weren't necessarily filling up the way we'd like them to. So our juniors and seniors are making different choices, and we want to give them different choices. So that didn't cost us anything. You know, it cost us a little bit for some new texts, but it didn't cost us, I mean, as far as personnel, it's just a shift of how we program and looking at what our students want. If you remember a few years ago, we switched to doing a lot of you know, high-tech manufacturing programs at Kingston High School. Again, that didn't cost us anything. We were able to create the curriculum through a partnership with Alcoa, but as far as personnel are concerned, it was just a shift from students who were taking some things that maybe they weren't really interested in anymore as they were growing. So coding is another one of those opportunities, I think. Any other questions on that? Thank you. Again, the tax levy limit calculation, you've seen many times. Our capital reserve fund, once again, just want to make sure people realize that the capital reserve fund is something the voters have to give us the permission to create. Any unexpected revenues or sometimes unexpended appropriations can go into that, as well as things kind of windfalls like the sale of Sione is also one of those things that we could put that in there. And while it sits there for a little bit, it will save our taxpayers long term when we don't have to ask them to go back to fix a roof, to repave something, to repave a wall, put in a new boiler, really to keep our school buildings in the conditions we want to keep it in, so we don't fall back. Deferred maintenance is not somewhere we want to go again. And having a savings account, more or less, with money in it to do those things helps the taxpayers and helps our kids in having safe, healthy, new, functional schools. The projects we're looking at this year with the capital reserve fund, again, one of the things I'm hoping that people aren't confused about and continue to talk about is voting on the capital reserve fund is to establish the capital reserve fund. The building projects with capital reserve fund are our current capital reserve fund projects. So in keeping with what I was saying, how we use it, this is how we're using the fund that we currently have, and we're expending all of the funds within that. That's why we have to ask to open a new one. Work at Edson Elementary School, like I said, very typical kind of things that are really safety, health, upkeep of our systems, heat, mechanical systems, windows, walkways, safety kind of things is what we really have used our capital reserve fund for, and I think it's appropriate, that's what we should use it for. John F. Kennedy, similar things. Kennedy and Edson, always say it, same building, same year, same architect, same designs. Edson has a basement, Kennedy doesn't. That's the only difference between the buildings. It makes sense that many of the same things are going in those buildings at the same time. And Miller Middle School, again, also similar as far as the year built. They're doing some very similar things there. The only one thing that we are doing that is a little bit more fun than some of the other things, a little more fun than paving or emergency lighting or the window replacement is the renovations to that auditorium. And anyone who's been to Miller for any kind of public performance or presentation knows that that is desperately needed. And for the 6th time this spring, I will point out the red duct tape that's holding down the carpet in that building, in that room. And it just happens to be right next to a spot where there's supposed to be a chair. So those are things we really want to do. And again, it's while some things seem simple as pulling out a chair, pulling out the rug, we also know that within these type of buildings, when you pull up the chair, you break the 6x6 tiles, and those 6x6 tiles, as you all know, are asbestos. So there's abatement and those kind of things. So we're making it a healthier environment as well as a more, more pleasant environment for people who attend things there. Our maximum project with the capital reserve we have, combined with our state aid ratio, will give us $16 million to do this work. We've worked with our architects and our construction management team. We can do the projects that we have in mind with this $16 million at no additional cost to our local taxpayers. So it's a $16 million worth of work for their children's schools and our community schools and they will not see it on their tax bill at the end, when it comes at the end of the year. We've had a really good track record of using our capital reserve. This is the 3rd time we're asking for a capital reserve. We've done the work that I've talked about. We've done asbestos abatement. We've done ADA. We've done ADA compliance, I should say, for students with disabilities. We have heating, electricity, plumbing, roofs, the things that we really need to be done. So we're not spending this on fancy, flashy things. We're spending this in things that keep our buildings, running and keep them healthy and safe for our kids. 3 open seats for the Board of Education. Each of those seats is a 3-year term, and it would begin this July. The last day for petitions is coming up pretty quickly. To have the petitions in by the 25th of April at the end of the business day, then they'll be returned to my office at the clerk of the board, which is Camille DePerno. The one thing I did not talk about, I'll go back, is the transfer of ownership of Deet Stadium to the City of Kingston. Now this is, our voters will not be voting on the transfer. They'll be voting to give the board the authority to enter negotiations for that transfer. Very similar to how the community gave us the permission to sell Tilson, to sell Sione, to sell Xena, to sell Sophie Finn. So all those buildings that we were able to repurpose and sell, we had to ask that permission to be able to negotiate that. And then it's the board's responsibility to do what is in the best interest of the Kingston City School District and our taxpayers and our students. So that is really what's being asked of of our voters this time around. We know why. The city has received a large grant from the state, and they've been given the okay to spend about $3 million on Dietz Stadium. That's $3 million that's definitely needed to be invested there. I'll give you a little piece of information that we just learned. Once again, we put in a really good package to the New York State High School Athletic Association to try to bring the football playoffs back to Dietz Stadium, and we were not successful. And from what I'm told, we had the best financial package as far as what we would be asking to be covered by the State High School Athletic Association, but we didn't have the facility. So they, again, are moving down to Middletown for another year, and we'll try again every year, but I think renovations will go a long way to helping us bring that back into our community. And that's really more than just a school district situation. You know, bringing those teams and those people into Dietz Stadium floods the city of Kingston with people for a whole weekend who are here watching football games. So that's $3 million that really needs to be put in there. I know that the Mayor and I have talked a lot about this. We are on the same page, but I also know that I won't always be the superintendent, and Mayor Noble won't always be the mayor. So we need to make sure, and one of the things the board has to make sure is when the voters do give us the okay on this, that we get an agreement that is in the best interest of our students, that gives us the same access to the stadium that we have now. The mayor believes in that. This is told me that that's kind of the non-negotiable for us. And I think that's the agreement that we have to work out, whatever way we can, and that will be, you know, our attorneys and the board having that discussion.
I have just a question. If that proposition is voted down, I'm not being negative, but I just want to know, so that means that the agreement remains in place as it is now?
Correct.
Does that mean the city would have to forego the monies to repair it?
Right.
The city would have to redirect that fund.
Right.
They would still get the $10 million.
But it wouldn't go to the stadium. The
It
$3
wouldn't go to
million
the stadium.
would not go to
They
the
would,
stadium.
they would use it for other projects within the.
And that won't come again. I mean, that's money that the community has to recognize is not money that's going to necessarily.
Right, it's not coming back in, and the other thing is, you know, I say it, if we can't do it, and even if we wanted to, we can't get state aid on it. So if we were to do any work and we went to our community and said we want to put $3 million into Dietz Stadium, it would be dollar for dollar. It wouldn't be the 60%, you know, 40% of $3 million. It would be 100% of the $3 million because we can't get this state aid on that property because of A, our joint ownership, and B, it's not considered a school facility because it's off of our property.
And taking it over as a school facility is not an option.
Taking over school facilities is an option. I mean, again, but to do the,
I'm trying to think it out.
yeah, I think we would still have would still be a challenge to get state aid on that property. That's one of the big.
I'm really glad that Ms. Heidecker did the video because I know I've been getting a lot of questions, we all are. I think the assumption is, we've said this, that the vote is for this to happen. And I think that it's really important that we do talk about that with people and our neighbors and explain the fact, like Ms. Jordan said, that this money is not going to come again.
Has there been any, I don't know, that I haven't been in any reaction to it. Is there any reaction that you get as?
You know, I think because I was there, you know, for events, and so people in the stands, but that's the assumption, is that the city is taking it over, and the fear, which I think Dr. Jacobowitz expressed too, is that we're not gonna have access to the fields, and I've done my best at least to say, no, that's our first priority.
Yeah.
And as you said, you know, we really need an agreement that this would go on in perpetuity. You're not gonna be here forever, you're gonna be here forever, but I think that's the concern that I'm hearing, that one, we're voting that the city is going to take it over, and the parents and student athletes feel like they just want to be guaranteed that they're going to have this place to play.
It's too late.
And I did at our parent meeting
Yes,
the other day. We did at the parent meeting that we had last
Last week.
Thursday. Yeah, last Thursday. That was part of
Pretty much
actually
the
of
same.
everything that I
Yeah.
presented. That was the thing that they had. But I think they walked away with a good understanding of it and supported.
Yeah.
I mean, I've discussed with you and Alan, my idea for that doesn't have to be brought up until we see that it,
We need to talk about
I think there's a lot of different legal ways for us to work with the city to make this happen. I think there are some good ideas out there that if we have the authority from the community to do it, then we'll start exploring our options as far as what the agreement will look like, short and long term.
Your analogy with the Sione building is good, because people understood that they gave the board the right to sell it, but it didn't sell for several years, and it wasn't until it was planned and everybody got what they needed. So it's the same thing with this Deed Stadium thing.
Yep.
Nobody would do it unless it was in the best interest.
I think about Tilson, because Tilson, the voters gave us the permission to sell Tilson before I became superintendent, and we didn't sell it till, I think, 3 years ago. So it was, they'd given us the permission, but we had taken a lot of time before we actually got.
I think that vote was in the 1980s.
Yeah, it was an old vote. It was, but
Took 25 years.
yeah. And again, I mean,
But you were right.
getting the permission to do it, it's really giving the permission for the board to negotiate and do what's in the best interest of the city and the students. And I don't think there's no one on the board who's going to negotiate away our use of the stadium. So that's, we have nowhere else to play football.
It's
There's
a lot
my-
of use.
Yeah, I wanted to say, like, I'll be serving at the Stadium Commission, and what I'd like to say, I hope the committee responds positively, about the stadium, because as a committee for the last 10 years or so, we managed to have, our general fund, about $250,000, and what the stadium needs is 10 times that amount. So hopefully they make the right choice.
What does the state playoffs, what does that bring into the community?
It's a good question. I don't know. I mean, I think someone could do an economic, impact study on that to see what it would bring in.
What it does is fill all the motels and fills all the restaurants for the weekend.
And if you can't park in Uptown, or in our parking lots if you come down that weekend, there are people everywhere. So there's a significant impact there for our Uptown business, especially our Uptown businesses. I'm sure
The condition of the field or the whole facility?
it's not the field is actually in very good condition. The track and the field, the surfaces are in very good condition. They're going to need to be replaced in the probably next 5 to 7 years. The field, not necessarily the track. The track is in good shape. It's the other parts. The stands, the locker rooms are below par, so much so that a couple of years ago our football coach rented a barn so there'd be a place for some of the stuff. The locker rooms are outdated and damaged and not really usable. The bathrooms are terrible. The stands, we had to replace some doors, so part of our agreement, we do some of the work, we had to replace some doors, and we couldn't drill the bolts into the facade of the stands because they were so deteriorated. To put the doors up, they had to shore everything back up. So the press box is one of those things that it's outdated. It's not what you see in it. What's that? Yeah, it's a chicken. So the press box needs to be redone, the entryway, the paving needs to be done in the parking lot, a change. One of the things that we looked at before, I think the mayor's looking at changing the traffic pattern there, signage to let people know where it is, bathrooms on the visitor side, those kind of things, updating the concession area. Really, it needs a lot of work.
Sound system.
Sound system,
Non-existent.
Wi-Fi, the ability to get Wi-Fi.
You have to just stream,
And if you go to Middletown, they literally have a jumbotron. It's like going to Yankee Stadium, it's unbelievable.
There's a lot of, people are making a lot of updates to their facilities that we need to do.
I know when we were getting the track and field and the football for those few years, the businesses were counting on it. It became something that they looked at. They knew what they could count on, and now it's disappointing.
And we're actively, especially with our new field house, going out looking for other state tournaments Volleyball, we looked at, we're gonna compete for, a lot of different those type of tournaments, court type basketball, those type of tournaments that come to us for their sectional and regional games, which I think we'll get some of those, but that's still, it's really still isn't the impact that
Yeah.
football has with so many teams from all over the state converging into.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
We will, the vote, just so the community knows that the board will be voting on the final budget, the appropriations on the 18th, which is next Wednesday.